Hello and welcome to Building the Premier Accounting Firm. I'm your host, Roger Knecht, president of Universal Accounting Center, and each and every week we have an episode here where we actually speak of what we can be doing to work on our businesses as we build quality accounting firms and at the same time offer great services to our clients, all in an effort to actually be profitable and, in fact, grow our companies. In this vein, what we actually do is we have on the show each and every week wonderful experts, individuals that can help us see various things that we can be doing to work on our business as it relates to marketing, selling, pricing, client onboarding, tech stacks, training our staff, client retention, and so much more. And this is going to be an excellent show as well. This happens to be Isaac Smith that I'm going to be introducing. He is the co-founder of bookkeeping firm Summit Ecommerce Advisors. He's the founder also of a recruitment firm called TeamUp. Now, while at Summit, he actually built a team of individuals in the Philippines to handle all the bookkeeping work that he was doing for his clients. And he's also the founder of TeamUp, which actually helps accounting professionals hire top talent in the Philippines, just like he did without going through offshore services. So, Isaac, welcome to the show.
Hi, Roger. Thank you so much for having me. This is going to be fun. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, very welcome. No, I've been looking forward to this. We had a great conversation before, and I'm excited to have this on the show. So, as the experts, we bring you on to actually share your insights, and you've got a lot of very timely bits of information here in the accounting profession. There's a lot to be said about the lack of professionals in the profession to basically tackle all the various needs that we have as firms and as businesses. So, this is going to be a timely discussion. So, here's where I want to go. Before we get into actually your current situation, I want to start with a little bit of your past. What got you into the accounting profession? Why are you doing this now? Because you've got an interesting story here that I think people will appreciate.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a meandering path. And so I was originally, long ago, I used to be an architect. And then I got into e-commerce because architecture sounds really great, but I was actually miserable and was looking for something else. So I got into e-commerce because I thought that was
Now, when you say e-commerce, you're not doing e-commerce as it relates to architecture.
It's something entirely different.
What was that?
Believe it or not, I was selling salon furniture. That's the thing that I ended up getting into. So like pedicure chairs, manicure tables, anything you see, you go and walk into a salon, hair salon, nail salon. That's the stuff that I sold.
Yeah.
I did that for several years and eventually sold that business. And I had some challenges around understanding my finances. And I was really, really frustrated with the solutions or the lack of solutions that I had through my bookkeepers and accountants. And eventually realized I learned that understanding your numbers is so much more than just what we all think it is. There's actually a really strong emotional impact, because I thought my business was doing really poorly. In fact, I thought it was crashing and burning, and so that gave me all kinds of anxiety for months before I did a deep dive on my own, educated myself, and learned, oh my gosh, I'm actually becoming more profitable on this revenue that is declining, but I didn't know that. And so like all those mental, all the stories I was telling myself, like, you're a failure, this isn't going right. Like all those things you tell yourself when it looks bad, those just simply weren't true. And I just thought, oh my gosh, I wish somebody had told me about this, right? Because all these months I could have saved myself so much heartache. And so that's why I decided, after selling that business, I want to help other e-commerce business owners have this understanding and have more of that piece that I should have had.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing this up. I really feel as if you're becoming vulnerable with this, because so many of the accounting professionals I speak with experience these types of conversations with their clients, where the entrepreneur, the business owner, they are running their business, but because of the lack of the information as it relates to the accounting financials, they're just in this quandary of what's going on in my business. And here's my point. You spoke of the anxiety and the uncertainty that you had as the business owner. What happens is entrepreneurs oftentimes have great ideas, but they take so often longer to implement and realize than they expect. And so they do kind of beat themselves up, if you will. And because of that self-inflicted pain, you're actually frustrating the process of growth because you're self-doubting. And so it's this vicious cycle. So for the accounting professionals to come in and actually help you realize, you know what, you're not doing as poorly as you thought you were. You actually are doing well. You're doing better month over month, year over year. Let's celebrate the successes and really kind of help you get that positive outlook that you have about your business, the reality of it's actually doing all right. It's doing okay. Would you agree with that?
100%. And, if I've learned anything at all, it's that business, as a business owner, we often think that running a business is mechanics or tasks or projects. You just do check things off the list. It couldn't be further from the truth. It's all emotional. It's all mental. And if you're not prepared for that, right, that can send you down some unpleasant paths. And whatever we can do to sort of strengthen ourselves and have an understanding of really what's going on, we're going to be able to just avoid all of those negative or some of those pitfalls.
Exactly. And as accounting professionals, just to kind of draw in the listeners, I think this is one of the things that we can truly do for our clients is through the numbers is give them some sense of security about what really is happening. Yes, they're dealing with the day-to-day operations of the business. They're experiencing it as they're running their companies. But so often there's that self-doubt that can creep in that too often is negative, not positive. And so if we can come in with the accounting information and help shed lights on some of the positive things going on in the business, what's going right, what can we do more of that's working, then I think that we're able to actually bolster up the business owner client to get basically focused on their business in a positive way and grow the company. So this is really, really helpful. So clearly you started, you've got your architecture business, you started in the e-commerce, you sell that, you realize, okay, there's a space here in accounting that is not being met, but you're not an accounting professional. How did you go through that rationale of, I'm not an accountant, but I'm going to start an accounting business?
I don't know. Maybe I don't know. maybe I just jump into things before I'm ready, not knowing enough. And if I had known everything that I found out later, maybe I wouldn't have done it. It's that whole thing. But you think I can do this? Really, I was focused on making an impact. Like really, truly, the educational piece. I wish somebody had told me that the net profit line on my income statement is not the money that I should expect to see in my bank account. Like I didn't even know that. And so I'm in these communities of other people just like me, and I'm discovering everybody else is like me. They don't know that very simple fact that, accountants take for granted. And so when I had meetings with my accountants, they didn't know that they need to explain that to me. And so, like that's so simple, right? If you're listening, you're an accountant. That is so basic. And but like, so if that's where your clients are, like everything else is just going to be confusing. And that was my experience. So I just wanted to solve that. And I've been able to do things that I didn't know how to do before. So I just thought, why not? So over time, I did something really kind of stupid, actually. I launched a bookkeeping business with a spreadsheet. I was going to have somebody, yeah, you're laughing, right? As you should. But this was the spreadsheet that worked for my e-commerce business. I figured it would work for others. It actually didn't. And anyway.
Well, here's why I laugh. It's kind of like saying I want to build a house, so I planted some trees.
Yeah, I mean,
so it's just like, okay, there's a better way to go about doing this. But before you go further, I do want to
Hmm.
jump back on two things. One, I really appreciate your insights as to the perspectives of business owners seeing the net income and believing that's what's supposed to be in the bank account. I believe my listeners need to hear that, because too often we do take for granted what we know and understand because of our formalized training, that we assume that if somebody's going into business, clearly they would understand accounting enough to realize this. If they're choosing to start a business, they at least have to have that understanding. And what the reality of it is we've got, like Michael Gerber said in the book E-Myth, we've got a lot of technicians, people that are good at what they do, choosing to go out there and provide that product or service. And the business side of that isn't what they're focused on. It's not like they're great business people and therefore they're going to go start a company. No, they're great technicians. They're good at a product or service and they started selling it and they just want to offer it to more people so this business develops. And what we do is we find ourselves working with amazing electricians, amazing therapists, amazing real estate people, and they're great in their trade or profession. But it doesn't mean they know what a balance sheet is. It doesn't mean they know what a profit and loss statement is. It can't imply that they know what those numbers are saying. That's why we have a job. That's why we exist as a profession. So I appreciated that insight. The second thing that I think is very important for my listeners to understand is I've had numerous guests on the show who do not come with formal experience or background in accounting and bookkeeping or tax for that matter, that start very successful businesses providing that service simply because of the perspective they bring to the discussion. You're able to actually bring to this conversation with your clients something that they value and appreciate, which is your perspective as a non-accountant providing this service. So that's really impactful in my opinion. So please continue with your story. You start your business, you've got a spreadsheet. Now what?
Yeah, it didn't work. so so in a trying to figure out what to do, I brought on a partner who did have the accounting background that I was lacking, and so we he helped me straighten it out, and so together we relaunched the business, and we went from there. But to your point, I think I always considered it my responsibility to help educate our clients, because understanding that they were just like me, we get into e-commerce because we either have a product or we know how to source a product, we know how to market that product and generate sales. But like you said, like the rest the rest of that, what we think is business fundamental knowledge, is just not there. And so I saw it as my job to, in meetings with clients, just educate them just wherever they are, give them just the next step, right? So like if it's the P&L that we're talking about, if they don't know how to read that, or if they don't know why just explaining why that net income line is not going into the bank account. Oh,
Mhm.
there's other things involved. Oh, so what do you mean with the cash flow statement? How does that work? Right? And so I would help educate my clients, as well as I'm in all these other communities. I would help educate in there. I added to some e-commerce courses a financial component, a few modules to some of these things, and so I really saw that education as really, really, really important.
Well, I again appreciate your perspective that you're bringing to the business community, because as a business owner offering accounting services, you have that insight. And I think what's important about your story here is that many accounting professionals start their accounting business just like all their businesses. They have a product or service that they're trying to provide. Doesn't mean that they're great business people. It just means they're great accountants. And so as an accountant, bookkeeper, tax preparer, you start a company offering a product or service. It doesn't mean you're phenomenal at marketing, selling, training staff, bringing on people. There's a business side of this that you likewise need to give emphasis to. You've brought those elements to the company. You bring in a partner that has the accounting expertise. Now you're able to provide quality services with a business mindset. So I like this combination. So the next thing I want to ask is about a struggle that many people are facing right now, and it's finding qualified staff. There's many firms out there that with the bookkeeping accounting services they're providing, they're actually in a position where they're overwhelmed. They're turning away
Yeah.
business. They're not able to grow as quickly as the demand has. They're turning away these clients. And so the point is they have this challenge of finding qualified staff. And in trying to find qualified staff, they're placing positions and so forth, and they're just not able to fill them. So there's typically three types of paths here. One is you hire a competent individual, so you're hopefully maybe taking them from another place and hiring them internally. But it's also then finding qualified people that lack the skills and training them, basically giving them the skills they need to do the bookkeeping, the tax, because they are loyal people. They have good work ethic. They may be family or friends, so there's some type of trust there. But the third option is offshoring. It's this idea of saying, okay, we do not have here in the United States the staff sufficient to fill the positions. We need to actually look at offshoring. So I want to talk about now what you realized and why you ended up going to the Philippines. What was your struggle that you were experiencing?
Well, this is going to sound maybe a little funny, but I'd never considered not going to the Philippines. If you asked me to fill an office here in the US with people, I would have no idea how to do that. But I've spent several years building remote teams in my e-commerce businesses. And so that was just the obvious thing for me to do. It's a skill that I have. I know how it works. So let's just go out and get some great accounting staff. And that's what we did. I didn't really think anything of it when my partner and I started growing the business. And we went from one person to two to five to 10 to 12 to whatever we're at now, 14, 15. And it was just what we do. And I didn't even realize that I was doing something weird until some other accountants started to notice and started asking me, because they said, we're really having a hard time finding people locally. What is it that you're doing? Oh, we'll just go hire these people in the Philippines. They're amazing. Wait, what? How does that work? You're really doing that? So that was it was just obvious to me.
Well, first of all, what is obvious to one isn't necessarily obvious to
Right.
everyone. So I first
Right.
of all commend you on that. And clearly, because of your e-commerce experience, you were aware of this resource that you could tap into and you knew how to do this. So that gave you an
Mhm.
advantage that other people, it's just an unknown. It's not something we're familiar with. So let's talk about, first of all, the concept of offshoring and why what you did was a little bit different. So offshoring typically implies that there's a service overseas. There's many of them in India, Philippines, South America. There's some in South Africa. I mean, there's a variety of these services where they basically serve the accounting firms. Oftentimes, it's the Big Four, and so you're dealing with those. But the point is they are as offshore services selling. We've got this skill set over here that we can put to work for you. How does that differ from what you did? Because you went direct.
Yeah. So it might be worth taking just a moment to break down the few categories that those fall into.
Yeah,
So you're talking about on in one bucket there are the services, and I didn't even know that the nuances of all this until just recently. But in one bucket there are the services that are basically maybe shared services or shared staff, where if you sign a contract with a company, you have a representative, you send them work. Don't really have any direct connection to the people who are actually doing the work,
correct.
just the management. So that's one bucket. Another bucket is um, you do have direct contact with the staff. And then, of course, there's shades of gray in here for how much contact do you have? How much is there a layer of management overseeing these things? But still, in that example, there's still this other company that you're going through. They may have an office. People come. They have desks and computers, and there's an office culture, office policies, all of that. So it's in either case, this one they might seem like they're your team, but they're actually not. Um, the way that I chose to go was just to hire people directly. I mean, it's just again, it's just what I always did in my previous businesses. And when I had a challenge in the previous businesses and decided I needed to hire someone, I didn't even realize that there are companies that you would hire instead of just hiring a person.
Mhm.
That wouldn't make sense to me. Like, well, I want to hire a person, don't I? So why is this other company involved? And so that's what I always did, is I'd hired directly. And in the early days, it was, there are several platforms. There's Upwork, there's onlinejobs.ph. There's a whole bunch of these job boards.
Fiverr.
And yeah, there's tons of them, and they all have a little different flavor of how you interact with them. And so, yeah, I'd learned over time that this works for me, and the nuances of each of these platforms, and which one had the best results. And so, yeah, I'm fully in the camp of I want to hire somebody great, right?
Yeah.
So just go hire somebody great.
Well, let me go back and kind of address a few of these, because I really would love your perspective on this, because I think my listeners will have similar questions as to what I'm going to offer here. One of the challenges that a lot of us who use virtual assistants and offshore type things is, first of all, the compensation. It's unclear what we would pay someone. The second is you have this concern over proprietary information, their ability to use that. And so many of the firms or services will provide what are called clean rooms, where they're able to kind of provide the computer, the software. They're able to provide a clean room where they're able to basically ensure, hopefully, that no one's walking out of the room with, say, social security numbers, credit card numbers, those types of things. But the point is those services are trying to actually help us so that we can easily make payroll. Because, if I needed to pay somebody in the Philippines, how would I go about taking care of payroll taxes and so forth as it relates to that other country? So there's a lot of unknowns here, where when you hire someone directly, as you have, you're managing all of that. You're providing perhaps the work environment in which they're doing the work, or hoping that they're actually in a secure place while doing the work. So there's a different dynamic. You're comfortable with that, and you went that route. The other happens to be the ones I'm more familiar with, simply because of the services they're offering to ensure that they're paying people fairly, that the work is being done in a secure environment. How do you address those things hiring people directly? That's where I want to go with this.
Yeah, and that's where I get all the questions, and we can talk for hours about these things, and they're fun. But I think, broadly, before we address any specific issue, I think it's worth acknowledging, these other services, these service providers were, in the early days, especially of first the first offshoring, the big companies, and then becoming more available to the smaller companies.
Yeah.
It was an important thing, because nobody knew how to pay internationally.
Yep.
We didn't know how to communicate across, the internet, especially, 15 years ago.
Correct.
Like, nobody knew how to do any of this stuff. So the service that they provided was really important. These days, with the power of the internet, right, we're looking at each other. We're thousands of miles, no, not thousands, probably 1,000 miles away from each other, right? Well, once we're on the internet, it doesn't really matter where we are. And so as technology and different solutions, Zoom, Slack, all these things become more easy and accessible, and it breaks down those barriers to where most of these questions are pretty easily solved, and solved in a way where, one of my favorite sayings is, there's no one right answer. It's just the one that works for you, your firm, and your staff, depend on any of these topics. So you end up having a few choices and paths to take to solve any of these things. So these days, my view is, yes, you do need to figure out your IT. You need to figure out payments. You need to figure out some of these things, but they're not really big challenges. You just have to make a choice and then do it. So I think, what these days, all of those things, being solved through a provider like the traditional providers, it is a convenience, but it's not that big of a hurdle. And in my view, I don't want to be paying a large monthly fee for a convenience that I can just solve one time and it's done and I don't worry about it ever again.
Yeah. The way I would equate it, and I think this is relatable, is the staffing industries that we have here in the States. There's a margin. They're typically between 40 to 60% margins on most of the labor. And so, yeah, I can go to a staffing agency, give them a job description. They'll interview the individuals, find the candidates, send over someone that I might be able to screen, just ask a few questions of. But more or less, I'm paying for the service of them hiring the right person, finding the right person. I agree. I bring this person in and they're a temporary staff, someone employed by someone else that I'm basically paying to have in the company do whatever task or function. Now all of a sudden that service is a costly way to administer all of this. And clearly what you're trying to do is go direct. You, like any employer, actually wants to hire somebody internally. So you bring them in and you're not paying that margin on top of it for the service that you're providing. So clearly there's a place for it, and you're showing the application of it in an international perspective. So I like that. Let me kind of switch gears here because there is something positive that I'd like to address because I work with individuals from the Philippines. I have some from Africa over in Kenya. I've worked with people over in India. There's a number of people that I have that are, for lack of a better term, let's call them virtual. And as employees, I have found them to be very, very competent and, more importantly, very, very loyal. They're very proud of the fact that they work for an American company, that they interact with, in my case, and I don't mean to say this in a proud way, but they work directly with me as the president of the organization. And so that's quite nice in their perspective that they have direct access to the president of a business. They're doing jobs that they are good at. But here's the kicker: they don't want to leave for another dollar here or 50 cents there. What have you experienced as you've worked with people as well?
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear what you just said. That has been my experience. Um, you hear all kinds of stories on the internet about the opposite,
Mhm.
about, people not showing up but I have found that's why recruiting is so important, identifying the right person. And yes, you can have all kinds of people if you hire the wrong person, just like you would in your office locally.
Correct.
And so, but once you once you find the right people, yeah, I have found that they are so loyal. They're so much fun to work with. They're wonderful, wonderful people. You think, and then you contrast that with Americans, right? Me, and my generation and younger, like, we don't want to stay at any one company. 2 years? Are you kidding me? No way. I'm out of there, man. Right? Right. So, but yeah, it, I mean, it's wonderful when you can provide a great opportunity to somebody, something that's exciting. You treat them well, you pay them well. Why would they leave? And they for the most part don't, unless they have some life change that they need to do something else. That's been my experience.
Well, one of the things that I've experienced that I is, it's my experience. I don't have anything else but my experience. But once you find the right people, because it's a crapshoot, it's a roll of the dice as to whether or not you're going to get somebody good here in the States or internationally. But once you get the good person internationally, I deal with less drama. I deal with more loyalty. And at the same time, they're able to, I work for an American company. They want to keep this. I mean, this is something
Yeah.
that they don't want to lose. And so they're less inclined to rock the boat. They're on time, they're predictable, they're very capable. I mean, with the screening and everything, I found very capable individuals. So my experience has so far been positive. Now, have I had some bad apples? Yes. Have I had some interviews where I found people that weren't qualified or ones that I felt would work well with me? Yes. But those that I have proven themselves to be very long-term employees that I've been very grateful for. So anything more you'd want to add to that? You chuckled with the drama comment that I made.
Yeah. No, it's funny. No, yeah. I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with everything that you said. And one thing that's interesting is I that intrigue, or the, like, oh wow, I'm working for the president, right? Like, I've had some calls with applicants, people who wanted to work with me sometimes, And had a comment once like, wow, I'm talking to the CEO. Like, to me, that's no, like I'm no big deal. But to them, it's like, oh, wow, this is cool.
Well, it's not only the CEO, but the CEO of an American company that wants to hire me potentially here in the
Yeah.
Philippines. I mean, yeah, and I don't want to overstate it, but at the same time, I don't want to minimize it. It is a big deal
Yeah.
to them.
And it's exciting, right? What we're I and here we can talk about what's exciting about to me about the impact is, here's this country of amazingly talented people,
Mm-hmm.
and they're wonderful people, good hearts, um, just and highly educated, and they don't have, I mean, there's opportunity in their own country, but now that they've been opened up to a global economy, there's a lot more opportunity for them than there was before.
Yep.
And opportunities in working with companies like yours and mine, there it's often a bigger opportunity than they could find locally. Maybe they would have to go to a bigger city, or maybe it's not even available there. And so now they have this opportunity. They can be wherever they are, and because of course it's global, there's a higher demand, and so their pay is usually a lot better than they could find locally. Oftentimes we're starting at 1.5 to 2 times what they could find locally. So like, imagine what that does to somebody, their life. And the commutes into Manila or one of the other big cities like Cebu can often be 2 or even 3 hours just one way.
Yeah.
And so you can tell a young mother, hey, you can have this great opportunity. We're going to treat you well. You're going to be really happy. There's opportunity for growth in your career, and we're going to double your pay, and you get 5 more hours with your kids back every day. It's like, that's a dream come true.
And they don't want to lose it.
Yeah.
They hold on to it with everything. So here's the next question then. Have you been over to the Philippines? Have you been there?
Yes, I've been there twice. I was just there in October,
Beautiful.
most recently. Yeah, it's
Okay. So
amazing.
you've met some of your employees then?
Yeah, yeah. We had a team retreat. Our first one was a year and a half ago, and we had another. We had now the team
Yep.
retreat just a couple months ago.
Love it. Love it. Here's the next question. With regards to the quality of staff, I don't think there's any question to the caliber of skills. You can hire CPAs and chartered accountants and very capable accounting professionals around the world. So the quality of the skills are there. But what I want to talk about is, what is the distinguishing characteristic that determines the success of using someone remotely? And this applies to even here in the States. When you have someone working remotely, I feel that there's one key element that determines the successful outcome, and it's the detailed instructions. It's having in place processes. What can you speak to ensuring that they are successful, and this is a um, a successful endeavor on our part? What would you say about that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and it's a perspective that I hear a lot. I actually have a different perspective. Um, yes, you can have. Yes, that can be a big factor in the success, having detailed instructions. But I've also found that if you have the right person, it's not super necessary. Oftentimes, I think the evolution of, from 15 to 20 years ago, where this idea of having international teams and, I like to use the air quotes, virtual assistant VA, because I don't really like that term anymore. But um, over time, I think people started out hiring in places like the Philippines because it was cheap. And so then they optimized for the cheapness. And so if you're going to optimize for the cheapness, you're going to get a certain level of person, right? Someone maybe who doesn't have a lot of experience, doesn't have a lot of skills, and they're going to need that hand holding and they're going to be good at that rote stuff because they don't have the experience to use judgment and whatnot in the industry that you're working in. Mm-hmm. Over time, people have realized the skills are higher and higher. And so I think we're slowly moving ourselves up that slope. But I want to make people aware that there are people all the way at the other end of that pendulum, incredibly skilled people who don't need any instruction. For example, so I have, of course, Team Up is a recruitment firm. And it's kind of like the story I told about the bookkeeping. I started it with just a process that worked for me. Mm-hmm. And over time, as we started working with more and more clients, that process didn't work so well at, higher volumes and also trying to get very specific people. And so I had a team that I had trained, a couple of people trained on my process. And they were very good at my process until my process kind of didn't work so well anymore. And so realizing that, I realized I needed a better process. I need to really professionalize what we do. And so I went out and I found a really, really highly skilled, trained recruiter. And she came in and I hired her. She's in the Philippines. I hired her and she built our process from scratch all over again, basically scrapped what we had, kept what was good of it, and implemented what she had learned through her years of experience. And so I didn't need to give her any detailed instructions. In fact, if I did, it would have screwed everything up. And so that's at the all the way at the other end of that pendulum of no, these are serious professionals. And so there's all shades in the middle. But yeah, I think you can find, if you're looking for someone who can follow a process, you can find those people. If you're looking for someone who you can say, here's what we're doing, here's the outcomes that we're looking for, here's the rough idea, make it happen, you can find those people too.
Yeah. Well, there's two things that I would share to this. I mean, clearly you brought up processes a few times in there. You mentioned that with the skills that some of these individuals have, you can actually bypass the need to be so meticulous and micromanaging of what they're doing because they do have the experience and skills that you're clearly going to be paying for, but at the same time be able to afford. But the thing I would point out regarding processes is my experience has been, one, people can't read my mind. And so one of the things is in order to set them up for success as opposed to failure is I need to be very clear as to my expectations. And oftentimes that means not just an outcome, but hey, follow these steps, use this process. And the other thing that I found that processes do is they actually accelerate the ability for them to do the job. In other words, if I don't give them a process, they have to create it. So they've got to stop and think and figure out what are they going to do next and what's the sequence here. And if they're in that creative space, there's going to be learning situations. It's going to break. And so I need to do my part to just basically say, here's something that I have proven. It's now something I can document. And because I've documented it, I can now duplicate it. I can have someone else do it. And once through the duplication, I can see that they're doing it as I would expect. And not that they can't do it differently, but at least I gave them a template that they can start with and follow. But eventually, they're going to get to the point where I'm confident enough in their ability to deliver the expected outcome that I can now delegate. It's your responsibility. Yeah. I'm not going to worry about it anymore. So it's document, duplicate, delegate. Now, with that being said, the other thing I also use is a 3-step process. It's tools, training, temperament. Tools, I've got to make sure you've got the tools, and we're going to talk about that in a second, but it's clearly, obviously, the computer, it's the software, it's the means to actually do the work. And if they've got the tools, if they've got the internet, it's not like I'm going to drive out there and pull the lines, but the point is they've got to have the tools to do the work. The next is training. I can give someone a hammer, but if I don't teach them how to use the hammer, a nail gun, whatever, that's great that the tool exists. It's phenomenal as a tool. It does exactly what it was designed to do. But unless I'm trained on how to use it proficiently, I'm going to stumble, make mistakes, not use it correctly. I mean, it doesn't do any good when you're taking a screwdriver and using it like a hammer trying to pound something in. Go grab a hammer and use the hammer already. And so the tools and training are very helpful. The temperament, I find that they oftentimes bring very good temperament, but it's clearly what's the drama in their life, their personal characteristics, their personality. Those things are innate, and I can't change those, but I can definitely affect the tools and the training. So when I bring those things together, whether it's somebody that's working across from me in the office, whether it's somebody that's working across town in another state or internationally, in order for me to ensure their success, I need those processes in place. And clearly, the more competent a person that I hire, the less I need to worry about training them on what's expected. But I at least want to start with something. How am I doing so far?
I wholeheartedly agree with that. Yeah, process is important. Um, totally.
Good. Okay, so let's talk about tools then. I know that you've brought up IT as something. I mentioned clean rooms. So is there anything to bring up about tools, the technology side of this, as well as maybe the security side?
Yeah, and you also mentioned something that I would like to highlight a little bit, which is
Please.
whether somebody's sitting across from you or in another state here in the U.S. or across the ocean, right? I would like to highlight that I think sometimes we overcomplicate this. We think like, oh my gosh, there's all these things I need to worry about, but really, it's just people. There everybody around the world, we have hopes and dreams and desires. We want the best for our families. And I think we overcomplicate things. So let's get into the IT and that. So I would suggest thinking about um, if you're going to be online, if you're going to be remote, and if you're going to have a remote firm, whether somebody is in the next state over or on the East Coast, if I'm on the West Coast, or whether somebody's in Canada or Mexico or the Philippines, basically you're remote. And so there are, yes, of course, a few nuances, but primarily best practices are going to be best practices. And, the 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 online world, right? There are, if you're concerned about hacks or anything like that, there are attack vectors, which are the same no matter where you are. And so if you're concerned about, you know, is this person over in another country going to do something nefarious? Well, I mean, maybe, but why would that be any different from somebody in Arizona
Hmm. That's
or
right.
whatever? Yes, of course, then we're all in the same country, we're under the same laws, so maybe you could take some actions. Maybe. Um, but it's not really that different. And if you are concerned, which you should be, about data security and client information, um, you know, there are, and I'm not the IT guru. I can refer people to people who can help set IT things up, and ways to segregate data if as is appropriate. What each firm is going to have different needs, and so it's important to consider those. But I don't think it's that scary.
Yeah.
Am I making
Well,
any sense?
yeah, you totally are. And one of the things that I like to do when I'm addressing this is the fact that when we're thinking of the boogeyman in the room, I often think that there's a healthy sense of paranoia and there's an unhealthy sense of paranoia.
Hmm.
First of all, you're in business. You don't know who anyone is. I mean, we can have all day long conversations about fraud and people embezzling funds. I mean, we can have that all day long. And if that's the paranoia you want to exist in, that's fine. But let's step back and just create then things that we can do to manage or mitigate those risks. And there are things you can do. I mean, you mentioned an IT company. There are a number that I'm familiar with that actually create firewalls and things that you can do to create kind of barriers and protections around the information. Clearly, with credit cards, there's a lot more compliance going on there where people just don't have access to the numbers any longer. So I think that issue is gone. When it comes to bookkeeping, yeah, there's a lot of data going on, a lot of numbers, but in reality, it's proprietary numbers. But it's not like there's a Social Security number in the financials, right? It's not as if the bottom line net income is a Social Security number that somebody can repurpose. It's just a number. Somebody made tens, hundreds, millions of dollars, and somebody in the Philippines knows this. I mean, where
Yeah.
that typically goes, I don't know. Generally speaking, we're not talking about publicly traded companies, and so it's not as if this is as top secret information. So, I just think we need to temper this. It is a concern, but to your point, you're doing with the same employee that's across the desk or in the other state. So, let's just kind of put in that context and then manage accordingly. So here's where I want to go then. Let's spin the positive on this. What has working with somebody overseas accomplished or helped you personally experience? How's your life better growing your firm now utilizing these individuals? How's this been beneficial to you?
Oh my gosh. I could talk for days about this. Well, first of all, it's just super exciting. I've always been interested in other cultures. I've traveled a lot. I've lived in Korea. Um, it it's just so cool that we get this opportunity. Like my parents didn't have this opportunity. Like, and so to expose ourselves to learn about other cultures, get to work with them, learn about their holidays. For example, have you ever heard of the Burr months?
No.
September, October, right?
Okay.
November, the Burr months in the Philippines, they have like 3 months of Christmas. So there's Christmas music in October in the malls when you go walking around. And I heard it. I heard Mariah Carey over it when I was there in October. So it was
Love
like,
it.
wow, that's different. And they love it. It would drive me crazy, but, but it's great. So it's like, wow, like such a little detail that's fun.
Yep.
So to
Yeah.
me, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I agree. One of the things that this has afforded you is the ability to have, with a tax write-off, the ability to go to the Philippines, experience great people, new culture, excellent food. I mean, there's a variety of
Yeah.
things here that you're getting to experience. And more importantly, you're actually addressing a need that a lot of people here in the States are facing, which is how do we grow our business when we're struggling to find qualified staff?
Yeah.
And clearly, you can find great people and train them, give them the skills, invest in them. And I think that's a viable option. I'm biased. Universal Accounting Center is a post-secondary school for accounting professionals. So clearly that's what we do is train staff. So that's an option. Second option is at the same time hiring individuals that have those skills, but they're hard to find. But the third is this offshore discussion that we're having. And whether you're employing them yourself or using a service, the point is it's tapping into that resource that's outside of the United States and leveraging it to grow the business that clearly needs to grow right now. Here's where I'd like to go then. I'd like to kind of summarize our conversation here today. And after that summary, ask you for a closing thought. Before I go and do the summary, though, I want to share with our listeners that actually in the episode description, Isaac is providing a free resource to our listeners to actually give you some information on how you likewise can build a team in the Philippines. So if you'd like to, go to the episode description, and he's provided there some links and such that you can take advantage of that I think you'll find very, very insightful and helpful as you're considering what these options are for your firm. So definitely go to the episode description for that. And then likewise, we're going to be providing some additional free resources in the episode descriptions that you will want to take advantage of, one of which I'd highly recommend. It is the book In the Black. It's 9 principles to make your business profitable. It's literally things that you can be doing to work on your business in the short term, midterm, and long term to ensure that you're growing your business profitably and at the same time effectively as you address the various needs that you have in the company. Now, with those things, I also want to, just as a summary, kind of highlight a few of the things that stood out to me. Clearly, Isaac is an entrepreneur. going from the architectural business that he had to the e-commerce business and now to the accounting services. Clearly, he's got that entrepreneurial mindset. And what's fascinating to me is clearly how he did not have the accounting background and experience that so many do, but he saw a need. He saw how the communication with business owners is lacking to help them be more effective running their businesses with the accounting information that they're receiving and paying for, but not maybe using. And so he saw that need. After a little bit of an effort, he teamed up with another individual and clearly grew his business. That growth was also associated with not just getting great clients, but clearly leveraging outsourced services where he was able to find and hire himself individuals in the Philippines with very good skill sets, put them to work, obviously have them do what needed to be done to grow the business to the point that he's at least created and built a phenomenal accounting firm that I'm sure all of us would be envious of. And so with that being said, I thought that was a good takeaway point. The third thing that I draw attention to is the fact that the optimism, the ease of which he portrayed this, that these are surmountable issues. These are things that we can tackle in today's economy, whether it be paying somebody internationally, finding somebody internationally, interviewing them, hiring them, training them. These are surmountable tasks, and they're things that we can actually take on ourselves, just like we would here in the States. So I think that's a great takeaway. And then just the personableness that Isaac brings to the conversation. Definitely a likable guy, more enjoyable, and at the same time, pleasant to hear. So I appreciate Isaac being on the show. So what's a final thought that you have for the listeners?
Thanks, Roger. um, I, you know, I always think back to why am I doing any of this? What am I doing this for? And I think that's important when all of us are considering which path to go down. And, I went down my path. So the listener, I don't know what decisions you're making, but it's oftentimes it's really important to reflect on what our vision is. And so I think if you go back to your vision and your values, most of these other decisions are much easier to make if you think of them in that context. And if we relate it to the people part, I see a lot of the mistakes or when things go wrong with staff, whether they're overseas or not, is a lot of times that vision isn't communicated to the staff, and you just get right into, okay, here's what I need you to do. We've got this client, we've got this. Okay, do this, do that by this time. And if you think about yourself in that role, right, you would want to be connected to that vision. And when you are, much better things happen. So, whether it's decision making or how you're treating your staff, like, just remember what are we doing here? That's what I often think about.
I love it. Love it. Wonderful words of wisdom. I appreciate that advice. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wrap up the show. And in doing so, I want to invite you as the listeners, if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast. We'd love to have you subscribe and receive each and every week the various notifications that you can in your different platforms to hear these episodes. We release an episode each and every week for you to actually hear from the experts what it is that you can be doing to work on your business as it relates to building the premier accounting firm in your area. So definitely subscribe and like this podcast. Give us some feedback. You can also do that. We'd love to hear what your insights are. We also want to invite you to GrowCon. GrowCon is an annual event. It's a live event, a conference that we do each and every year where we put on the stage experts, giving you a chance to come hear what they have to say as it relates to running your business. And then in addition to that, gives you a chance to interact with your peers, meet other individuals like you that are building successful bookkeeping, accounting, and tax businesses. That's there you're able to collaborate and oftentimes make great connections as it relates to growing your business. So definitely take advantage of the networking opportunities there. And then lastly, meet the staff here at Universal Accounting Center, the individuals that are actually committed to helping you be in business for yourself, but not by yourself with Universal Accounting Center. The other thing I want to point out is if you would like to find out more information about this and other topics that we're discussing, feel free to reach out to us. You can give us a phone call at 801-265-3777, or you can visit us online at universalaccounting.com. And at universalaccounting.com, you can find some free resources, playlists of the podcast. We've got playlists that you can binge listen to. So definitely go to universalaccountingcenter.com and see what it is that you can take advantage of. And with all that being said, keep this in mind. If it is about accounting, it is universal. Take care, have a great day, and be safe out there.